Welcome to the Massachusetts School of Law Educational Forum. Thank you for joining us. This program is brought to you by the Massachusetts School of Law and is shown nationwide. The topic for today's show, women in sports. In the hour that follows, we will explore female entrance into professional sports, like soccer and race car driving. Think about the following and then you decide whether this is fact or fiction. There are sports in which women can compete equally with men. Women are generating interest and money in sports because they stress skill over strength and size. Women comprise 40% of the viewers of national baseball, football, and basketball games. The media suffers from misconceptions concerning which sports women will watch and which women's sports all viewers will watch. That young girls who participate in sports are half as likely to get pregnant as girls who don't. Participating in sports does not make women unattractive to men. I am Diane Sullivan, a professor at the Massachusetts School of Law. Stay tuned for our show. Joining us first is my colleague, Michael L. Coyne, the Associate Dean at the Massachusetts School of Law, with some players from the Boston Breakers.
Maren, how would you compare women's professional soccer and men's professional soccer?
So I think here in the USA it's a lot closer, so people come to women's games and the women's national team is very famous. And in Europe there's just men's soccer, so there are about 200 people coming to the women's games. So if you are a player here, it's wonderful to be in that league, to have all the supporters to come to women's games.
Do you think on an international basis that women's soccer or women's professional sports will ever achieve the same level of respect and viewership that it has in this country at this point?
I hope so. I mean, we are still working on that, and I played 10 years for the German national team, and it's just hard work to get people in, to get the TV stations in, but I mean, we are still trying to get that attendance that the men's have.
When you talk about a female athlete in generally, I think some people think that female athletes are less competitive, don't care as much about winning. I've watched you play, and I don't see that in your game. Are women just as competitive on the playing field as men are?
I think so. I mean, I can't see that women are less competitive than men. So, and I think people who come to our games will see that too.
What about the skill level? Is the skill level for men and women's professional athletes generally the same?
I think it's a little bit different. So if you watch a women's soccer game, the technique is a little bit better, and I mean, men are more physical, but I think if you watch a women's game, then you can see that it's getting better.
Do you think that they will become a point where men and women could compete on the same soccer field professionally?
I don't think so, no. But I don't think that we need that. I think it's good to have women's games and men's games, so people like to come to the women's games and watch them.
Do you believe that women's games will ever have the same level of audience attendance and national TV contracts and the like that we see some of the men's professional sports have?
I think with the US soccer, it's that they show as many women's games as they do with the men's. So that's a right way. I hope in Europe one day we can have that too.
For training and the like, is it just as aggressive, just as tough for women's athletes in training and getting ready for competition as it would be if you were playing for a man's team?
I don't know, but I believe that we are practicing really hard, and I don't think that men can practice much harder than us. So we do everything to get ready for the game, and I think that's what men do too.
Do you think it is advantageous for young girls to get involved in sports?
Of course, it's the best thing to be. I think it's the best thing to be in sports, and it's even better to be with a team because you learn so many things that are important for your life. So, I mean, it's the best thing for kids that they can do.
Is the team level of playing the same? The same level of closeness, the same level of working with one another. Do you believe the same as on a women's team as it is on a men's team?
I think so. I mean, we have 20 players, and we can have 11 can play every week. So it's a fight in every practice, but I think it's on a normal level like in men's teams.
Angela, how would you compare women's professional sports to men's professional sports?
I would say it's actually a different game. With men and women, obviously there are physical differences. So with the men's game, it's a lot faster, a lot quicker, a lot more aggressive play. With the women, you still have a physical element, very aggressive, but there's a lot more possession you see a lot of times, and not so much kicking in and running because the speed is a little bit more similar across the board.
Do you think that then the men's game has a higher level of athleticism in it than the female game?
No, I wouldn't say that. I think the women's game definitely has a lot of athleticism. Obviously, we're all athletes, so it's just a different style of play.
Some people suggest that the women's game tends to be more skilled and a higher level of fundamentals. Do you agree with that observation?
I'm not quite sure, actually. I would say that on both sides there are definitely high elements and high levels of skill, but I would say that we have to use different attributes, and with the women you might see a little bit more team organization, team play, and a lot of times in the men you might see a little bit more individual play. Obviously the men's game has been around for a longer time than the women's game, so other things have developed in the men's game that you haven't necessarily seen in the women's game yet.
Angela, at the college level, how did you see women's and men's teams treated?
I went to University of Virginia, and we had a very good program there, and I think one of the main focuses was to try to treat all teams equally. And I think obviously the development of women's soccer in this country has grown tremendously. It's not there for all colleges yet, but I think in the near future it will be.
Can women compete on the very same field as men in soccer or in any professional sport, in your opinion?
I would say yes. I know personally I've played with boys when I was growing up. I know there are other women who have played with men, so it's different, and I think you are able to learn a lot of things playing with a men's team that you might not be able to play on a women's team, but I don't see it going in that direction. So I would say that they still would remain separate though.
How has playing women's professional sports changed the way you either look at life or look at other things?
I just think that in this day and age it's just a great opportunity, and to be able to play soccer professionally is just a different level, and you get to play international players, you get to play with these players and against them, and it's growing. The sport is growing so rapidly, and it's just great to be involved in that.
Now I know you're somewhat biased in this regard, but are soccer players, whether they're men or women, are they the best athletes on the planet or what?
I wouldn't be able to say if they're the best or not. There's obviously a lot of physical demands and mental demands in the game of soccer, and you don't have timeouts in soccer. You're on the field, you're making the decisions. The coach can make coaching points at halftime, but that's about it. And you're playing 90 minutes, you run about 5-6 miles at least a game, and there's a lot of different skills and techniques involved in the sport.
Angela, are women professional athletes just as competitive as men when they get on the playing field?
Yeah, I wouldn't even know why you'd ask me that question. I mean, we're all in the field, we all want to win. I think that's why there's a professional women's soccer league, because the competitiveness is there, and women just as much as men want to win and be that competitive.
In another 10 or 20 years, where would you see women's professional sports in this country?
Hopefully expanding in more venues in the country, and I would hope that even increasing in the salary ranges and getting more fans out there. The fans here in Boston are great, and just having more people be aware that there is a women's professional soccer league in the country, and it's a great time to come out and enjoy the sport.
Are salaries presently near or on par with the men's professional league?
They're near. The salary range from $26,000 to $85,000. So, it's definitely something we can live off. And I think that was important for us to start off a league like that. So it's been great.
Now, is this women's professional sports or women's professional soccer? Does that end up being your only job, or do you off season do you have other jobs as well that most of the players engage in?
It varies from person to person. It's a full year salary, and we have a season starting in April and going to August. So we do have off-season commitments that we like to help promote the team and the league. But it varies. Some people will go back to coaching or things like that. So some people, it's the only thing that they do.
Okay, now I have a girls U12 team that I coach. What advice would you give them that so they could end up someday playing professional sports like you do?
First and foremost, enjoy the game. If you're loving it, it's going to be a lot easier to play it, and you're gonna learn. You're gonna grow as a player. And the second thing is just be disciplined and really try to practice your techniques and perform.
Tracy, how would you compare the women's professional game and the men's professional game?
Well, I'd say the men are typically a bit stronger, a bit faster, so the game is a little bit different in terms of it's a quicker pace game, but it's also more physical. You'll see harder tackles. But the women's game still is quite fast, just since we don't take up as much space physically, we don't cover ground as fast. I think you'll actually see more of the game. You'll see it settle down a little bit more. You can see the flow of the game, the build-up, so it is a slightly different game from a fan's perspective.
Is there more teamwork in the women's game, or is it just the same level of teamwork that you'd see in the men's as well?
I'd say it's comparable. I mean, on a given day, it'd be pretty close. Might be slightly different in terms of men might have a tendency to be a little bit more taking on responsibilities, 1v1s, that type of thing, more of that.
Someone suggested it's almost an individual competitiveness as opposed to the team competitiveness that sometimes we see.
Yeah, there are both components, and you've got to find that balance between the two to have a successful team. Definitely both critical elements.
Do you think that women's professional sports at some point will achieve parity with the men's soccer and other professional leagues?
I think it's a long way to go. Kind of on all ends of the spectrum. Financially, it depends on getting some of the media attention so that we get the TV coverage, we get the papers, and then from there, we're out in the markets more, we draw more sponsors, and it all kind of feeds into itself. We draw more sponsors, our league is more successful, we bring in more revenue, then we can pay the players more, and everybody else, the coaching staff, the office staff, and it kind of all is connected.
Do you think that the media presently treats women's professional sports fairly? I mean, part of the drive would be for more coverage. Do you get sufficient coverage now, or could they cover it in much greater depth?
It's getting better. It's getting better. Each year we get a little bit more. It's tough. It's a tough market when you've got the Red Sox, the Celtics, the Bruins, the Patriots, and they're all doing successful or all having successful seasons. So it's hard to kind of find a niche in there, but we're working our way in there, and I think each year we get a little bit more fan base. As our fans demand it, we get more coverage.
Well, in part of the coverage, at least, is caused by the success of the women's Olympic team that you were on. How does that experience, playing in the Olympics as a female, differ, do you think, from playing as a man in the Olympics?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know the perspective of a male that's gone through a World Cup or an Olympics. I'd say probably the biggest difference, looking at the success of our men's team this year at the World Cup and then our success, is financially. I think they make it into the quarterfinals, and their bonuses are much greater than what we got from winning the Women's World Cup. Now, a lot of that's money that comes from FIFA and sponsors that are not there on the women's side, so I can't blame the U.S. Soccer Federation because it's not their money to give out. It's the money that's coming from sponsors and FIFA and international funds. It's just not there on the women's side yet, but it is getting a lot better. It's getting closer each year. We're behind. Some of these other leagues, professional leagues, have been in place for a lot longer than the women's have.
Do you think that women in general in professional sports are treated better in this country than they are on the international basis?
Definitely, by far. We get the most coverage here, media-wise. We definitely get the most support financially and the most fans than anywhere else in the world. So this is the place to be if you want to, play women's sports.
Okay, now how does a little girl growing up in North Andover, when there was no professional soccer teams, decide to somehow commit herself to do it and make that come true?
Well, growing up, I never knew that this is where I'd end up for sure. I just really loved the game and just kept playing and playing, and I was just fortunate to have come around at the right time, that some opportunities just kept opening at the right time. It was just luck for me, and I just enjoyed playing, kept at it, and things fell into line.
In another 20 years or 10 years, where would you see women's professional soccer?
Hopefully in bigger stadiums, attracting more fans. Maybe we're in a Foxborough type venue because we're getting, you know, the upwards of 20,000 fans on a consistent basis. That would be great. Better salaries, more teams, a little bit of expansion so we get some teams in the Midwest and more teams along the West Coast. That would be a great start.
What do you see the benefits are of a young girl playing soccer or any sport?
Definitely keeping them out of trouble, keeping them active, getting them healthy, building strong muscles, strong bones, great for their heart, just great for their overall fitness and health, keeping away from drugs, alcohol, everything else that we don't want to see our kids messed up with, and also great for their self-esteem, confidence, you know, learning to deal with setbacks, all the great things that come with teamwork, commitment, dedication, all of those come from playing any type of sport.
Let's go to some young girls and hear why they play organized sports. Can you tell me why you play soccer?
Well, I do it for teamwork, and I also do it to learn how to play the game. That you can get the ball and you kick it and you get a goal. Well, because it's fun, and I think you learn how to run faster, or I just think it's for fun. You have fun and you make friends. Because I like to make friends and I like to have a sport in the summer. I like to play soccer because I like playing defense and I like getting in the game and getting goals and get going with friends and stuff.
Every time an adult gives up on our kids, every time we surrender to the belief that their future is out of our hands, another child is left behind. I'm General Colin Powell, and I don't believe in giving up. That's why I'm asking you to join America's Promise. Log on to americaspromise.org or give us a call. Whoever you are, wherever you are, you can do something important. Pull your weight.
They won't leave you for someone younger. They won't notice you've gained weight. They won't fire you. They won't talk about you behind your back. All they'll ever do is love you. Find the love of your life. Visit PetFinder at aspca.org.
Hey, this phone's taken.
Son, will this help you?
Maybe the last thing you would do for somebody should be the first.
Thanks. Hey, I appreciate it.
A message from the Credit Union Foundation and your hometown credit union.
Welcome back to the Educational Forum. Catherine Switzer is a pioneer in the struggle of women in sports. She was the first female athlete to register and run in the Boston Marathon. But it wasn't smooth sailing, as we found out.
No, we absolutely didn't think that we were prohibited from running. We knew it would be unusual because women hadn't run. And I was wondering why Roberta had run the year before without numbers, and she slipped out of the bushes right after the start and ran. But I had no idea that she was denied any kind of entry. And Arnie said, listen, you've got to do these things legally. You've got to sign up, you've got to get your travel permits, and you've got to get a physical, which I got at the school infirmary at Syracuse University. So we sent all of our paperwork in together. Arnie and me and John and Tom, we ran as a team. And the rest is history, as they say, because the morning of the race, it was snowing and sleeting, and Arnie, the coach, went in and picked up this envelope of our numbers as a team and came out to the car. We pinned them on and did our warm-up. This is kind of how we did it at all our track meets, so there was nothing unusual at that point.
What did Jock Semple say to you? What did he do to you, and how did you react?
Well, it was funny because, as I say, it was snowing and sleeting at the start of the race, so we all had on these gray warm-up suits, and you look at any of the archival footage of the race and you'll see all the men were dressed alike, so from a distance I probably looked like one of them. I was pushed into the starting pen area by Will Cloney, who was the race director, and he said, "Come on, runners, get in there," and he pushed me, and I looked at Arnie and I said, "Well, obviously, you know, he knows I'm a woman, there's no problem here." He was probably looking and checking off the numbers, see, in his defense.
Yeah.
Anyway, I got into the start, and all the men were so congratulatory and wishing me the best of luck. The gun went off. Down the street we went. And of course, you know, it's like going to Mecca, first-time marathon runner. I couldn't believe, after all the training and all the sleet and snow and ick of Syracuse, that I was finally now going to Boston. I was with people who were like-minded, who loved to run and loved distance, and here I was, and I was in heaven. But 4 miles into the race, the press truck came through, and in those years, the press truck started behind the runners, if you can imagine this, beeped its way through. We all had to move over, and the press truck came through, and it was a flatbed truck with risers on the back and photographers, and well, they went crazy seeing me, a woman in the race wearing numbers, and began, you know, taking our pictures. Well, we were waving to them and that kind of business, and alongside of us came another bus, which was the scribes, the journalists, and they were apparently teasing Jock Semple, who was the co-race director on the bus, that there's a woman in your race, hey Jock, you know, she's wearing 261, and he just lost his temper. He made the bus stop and jumped off the bus and went down the street and went after me, and I didn't hear him until just a split second before he grabbed me. I heard his feet, and I turned like this, you can see that in the picture, and he grabbed me by the shoulders, and he spun me around, and he screamed at me, "Get the hell out of my race and give me those numbers." And when he had me by the shoulder, he tried to rip my numbers off like this. I was terrified. I really was. Because it came out of the blue like that. And I tried to get away, and it was like that monster dream you have at night before the race. You know, you're trying to get away from the monster, and he had me by the shirt and was screaming at me, "Get out of the race." And little Arnie, my coach, was screaming, "Leave her alone, Jock. She's all right. I've trained her." And I thought, he knows him. You know, what's happening? And my boyfriend, Tom Miller, who was in the race only because I was in the race, and he was going to show that he could run too.
Without training, of
Without
course,
training,
right?
of course. That's a whole other story. And he was a 235-pound ex-All-America football player turned into a hammer thrower. So he sees this happening, and he, without a word, he goes running full tilt and hits Jock with a crossbody block, takes him clean out of the race, flying through the air, and Jock landed on the side of the road. I mean, he really hit him. And I saw Jock flying and crunched over there. I said, "Oh my God, we've killed him, you know." And now I was scared all over again. And Arnie was scared too. And Arnie said, "Run like hell." And down the street we went. And we just went flying down the street, and every pandemonium, and the press truck was taking pictures. Well, you know, in hindsight, you say, how could Jock have been so silly to do this in front of the press truck? Well, he lost his temper. It just happened. And it's a series of coincidences you couldn't have repeated if you were Cecil B. DeMille. I mean, it was just all happened in a row. The press truck hung with us for quite a while because they didn't believe I was serious. And when they realized I was serious and in it for the duration, then they went on up to the start of the race. And a lot of those journalists waited in the cold and the rain and the snow for me for 4 hours and 20 minutes, because that's how long it took me to finish the race, because they were determined to write the story about the girl who couldn't do it. An interesting thing happens when you're running, and I think you know this, Diane, is that you can't run 26 miles, 385 yards and stay mad. And I was very, very angry after this happened. I went from being frightened and embarrassed to being very angry, and then I calmed down, and Arnie said, "Come on, let's just get it together." And you become resolved. You work out your aggressions and your anxieties. And I said, why am I because I thought I was the only woman in this race. Why aren't there other women here? And why aren't there sports scholarships and professional teams and opportunities for women? And the light bulb went on. You know, it wasn't because women weren't interested. It was because they didn't have the opportunity. And I was there because I was lucky. I had parents that encouraged me, and that I'd met Arnie, who encouraged me and gave me the opportunity to prove myself. And I was determined when I finished the race, I was going to do two things. I was going to become a better athlete, because I knew I was better than a 4-hour and 20-minute marathoner. And I wanted then to create opportunities for other women in running, in sports, but I decided in running because it was cheap and easy and convenient for them, and create avenues of acceptance. And I was very, very blessed, being 20 years old, to have such a negative thing happen to me, that I could turn into a positive thing, and actually something that gave me the rest of my life. And
Not just for you, but for so many other women.
Yeah, but it gave me like my career and my goal and my religion and my husband and all kinds of wonderful things. It was just amazing. And to help positively change the lives of many women and lead them down a road of fitness and opportunity has been extremely validating and gratifying for me.
Did you run again in 1968?
No, I was afraid to run. I was afraid that Jacques Semple would come after me again because he was very angry. And I was also persuaded by my boyfriend, who had then become my husband, Big Tom Miller, to please not to run because it would ruin his chances of making the Olympic team in the hammer throw, and because he thought that I would create an incident. So
another hurrah.
Hurrah. So I sat on my hands for 68 and 69. But by 70, I realized Tom wasn't going to make the Olympic team, that in fact our marriage probably wasn't going to make the long haul, that I missed running and I missed the marathon desperately, and I wanted to come back and I wanted to break 4 hours, and I came back and I did a 3:35.
Wonderful.
So it was a wonderful, wonderful time for me, and from then on I got better and realized that wonderful dream that an athlete realizes, which is to watch your body get better. It was a great feeling.
Tell us about your Boston Marathon in 1972.
In 1972 was a tremendous year because that was the first year women were accepted officially. And it was a funny year for me. I really thought I was going to win that year. And unfortunately, what I did is I wore a very, very nice outfit that was sort of programmed for colder weather. It was all like a bodysuit and tights and a wrap. And it turned out to be a hot day. And 4 or 5 miles into the race, I realized I was in very serious trouble and had to stop in a gas station, find a pair of knife or scissors or whatever it was, and cut off those tights and take off this long sleeve top, and lost, probably 6 or 7 minutes, lost the race. But still finished third. And the funny thing about this is that I was presented a trophy. And
By who?
By Jacques Semple. And he was sputtering and fuming, and I was kind of picking my fingernails. And the trophy was broken. It had broken in packing or something, and he was very embarrassed, and he handed me the trophy, and he said, I'm sorry, this is a broken trophy. And he said, I've been mad at you for 5 years, and you deserve a broken trophy. And that trophy resides, still broken, in the Hall of Fame in Utica, New York, Long Distance Running Hall of Fame.
Now, Jacques and you ultimately had further exchanges. There was a point where he kissed you on air.
I was very nervous, and I was on the starting line because we had deserved one starting line position, and I wound up getting it that year. And I was standing there, I was very nervous, and all of a sudden, Jacques came over and grabbed me, and I went, because I thought, oh my gosh, what have I done wrong? And he pulled over and gave me a big kiss, and he said, come on, Lass, let's get a bit of notoriety. And this picture, flashbulbs popping, and that was the picture the New York Times used the next day, and it was subtitled. The caption said, "The End of an Era."
What were the limits, Catherine, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s to women's running?
One of the biggest problems with women's sports in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and of course before that, was this prevailing myth that somehow a woman would lose her femininity, and it was kind of whispered what that would be. I mean, would it be big hairy legs and mustaches, or would your uterus fall out, and we'd never be able to have children, or you'd never get a boyfriend or a husband or whatever? Well, of course, you hear these myths all your life. You're not going to become an athlete. You're not even going to go there. And for me and many women who were in sports, we loved the sense of accomplishment and the fitness and the joy and the real good health that came with it. And so overcoming these myths was very, very hard. What we did is many of us began campaigning to try to overcome the rules with hard evidence. One of the things I'm most proud of myself for doing is creating the opportunities for women. And because I felt that if you see thousands of women out running and they're doing it really well, obviously, actions speak louder than words, and this is going to stand for a lot of testimony. But the other thing we did is we really worked hard on getting the medical evidence together. And there were many physicians who were particularly stand out in this area, and I would think of Dr. David Martin, for instance, or Dr. Ernst von Achen and David Kostil. These are people who did research on women and found, in fact, that when it came to endurance events, women had inherent capability that perhaps men didn't even have. They could go longer, but not as fast. They could they could stay the distance. They had more stamina and endurance, and there are a lot of reasons for that. Perhaps, you know, it's the higher fat content in our systems. Anyway, but that evidence had to be presented to the governing bodies, the International Amateur Athletic Association, Federation, and the IOC, and particularly International Olympic Committee. But when it was submitted, we finally won them over. But it took a long, long time.
You were banned, as I recall, by the AAU. Was that for running without a chaperone?
One of the amazing things is after the 1967 Boston Marathon, and this just shows you how mad Jock Semple was at me, is he obviously filed a petition that night to have me disqualified from the Amateur Athletic Union. Well, now the irony of this is I'd gone through all the paperwork and getting the numbers so that I wouldn't get in trouble with the AAU. But anyway, I got a special delivery letter the next day at my university, which suspended me from the Amateur Athletic Union for running the Boston Marathon for one, fraudulent entry because I signed my name with my initials. 139 guys had signed with their initials. Two, for running with men, which was really hateful because who else was there to run with? And also that was sort of a sexual implication. You know, running with men was somehow bad. The third thing was running in a race of longer than 1.5 miles, because the longest distance, they said, for women was 1.5 miles of cross country. And I said, well, what problem is that? And it was whispered that I might injure myself. So this rule was designed to protect me from myself. But the last rule was the best. The last reason was the best, as I was suspended from the AAU for running the Boston Marathon without a chaperone. So that shows you how far we've come.
Catherine, any final comments?
I would like to tell every woman and man who's listening that you're limited only by your dreams, and that it is as simple as putting one foot in front of the other to reach out and grab health, fitness, and a tremendous sense of accomplishment and self-esteem. And I would really love everyone out there to get moving.
Joining me now in New York City is Ira Burko, a sports columnist for the New York Times for more than 20 years. Ira has been a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize for Distinguished Commentary, and in 2000 shared the Pulitzer Prize for National Reporting with his article on The Minority Quarterback. He is the author of a number of books, including To the Hoop, a simply terrific read. Thank you for joining me, Ira. Ira, how does national sports coverage differ between men's sports and women's sports?
On a personal level, there's a difference going into locker rooms. But
and tell the audience you keep out.
yeah. But there are some we can go in sometimes into locker rooms and basketball teams and tennis sometimes. But how do we? The coverage has changed, of course. When I broke in 1965 at the Minneapolis Tribune, we almost didn't cover any women's sports at all. But now, since Title IX, of course, in the early 70s, the coverage of women's sports is growing more important, and they keep getting better. The girls keep getting better, and you see this in basketball. In the last 20, 25 years, there's been a tremendous increase in the ability of the girls. I don't know what they've been eating, but it is, and they're. I also enjoy women's basketball a great deal. It's said, and I agree, that the women today play the way the men did in the 50s.
Sure.
With this kind of team play and no dunking. Dunking has helped destroy a lot of the beauty of the game in many ways, taking away from the team aspect of it, because so many of them just want to dunk, but the girls don't dunk. Girls pass off. The girls try hook shots. So that's been a difference. Of course, they've always covered women's skating and figure skating, and it's interesting that if you look at the 20 highest-rated sports events on television in history, that 18 of them are Super Bowls, and 2 of them, I think they're number 3 and number 6, are figure skating. And it was the Nancy Kerrigan, Tanya Harding events at Lillehammer, which I happen to have covered, by the way.
Oh, wow.
But of the 20 highest-rated television sports shows, only 2 are not Super Bowls, and those are the ones.
But it's interesting, the women's sports that get covered are, in fact, figure skating and tennis. Why?
Yeah.
Because women are portrayed in their, you know, feminine role.
Well, but basketball more and more, and you know, the WNBA is, you know, they tried a few women's leagues before this, before the WNBA, and they didn't work. And they, in fact, just a few years ago, they had a competing women's league, which some of it merged into the WNBA. But they seem to. I think that more and more people are getting interested in what women are doing, and soccer. Oh, I mean, soccer has for a while when the U.S. team won the World Cup a few years ago. It was big news, front page stuff.
Are female athletes portrayed as sexual objects in a way that men are not?
I don't. Well, maybe women are portrayed more as sexual objects in comparison to men, but I don't think that overall necessarily. As time has gone on, I know that we veer away from that, and you don't anyway write about a woman jockey having pretty legs, for example, as I once made the mistake of writing many years ago. You write about them as being jockeys. You write about them as being, as you know, the skills in basketball. I still can't adjust to women's hockey in the roughness of the hockey. It seems that as I watch more and more women's hockey, and I don't watch a lot of it, but you know, the banging and the hitting seems pretty strong. And you know, to each his own, fine. But somehow or other, I recoil a little bit at women doing this. You know, I mean, I guess in some way you'd still like to think of them as being the fairer sex. Everything being equal, you know, I mean, women should be doing all the things that men do. But somehow that and women's boxing.
I was just going to ask you, do you cover women's
boxing? It's hard for me. It's hard for me to watch, and I don't get any pleasure out of it. And I do like men's boxing. A civilized human being should not like boxing, period. So I'm still trying to learn to be civilized.
Thank you for joining me today, Ira.
They came from every corner of the country, from small towns and big cities. But they all shared one thing in common. They belonged to a family called Marines, a tough and determined few dedicated to protecting everything we hold sacred. And still, they come. Celebrate the 225-year history of those proud few who have earned the title Marine.
This is the story about a group of kids who volunteered.
Doing something nice for someone.
We fixed stuff.
Did some art projects with the kids.
We fixed up his house. We worked in the woods.
Cleaned up the park.
Did something for the planet.
We just did it.
No other reason. And you know what? It was great.
At first, they didn't know each other.
Well, that didn't last long.
This guy is really funny.
Me? These are my
New friends. Are you into it?
Call 4-H or check out our website at areyouintoit.com.
Here, Kitty.
Before you know it, she talks. Before you know it, she walks. Before you know it, she knows you. Before you know it, she has a heart. Before you know you're pregnant, when your baby's no bigger than a grain of rice. Before she's a twinkle in your eye, that's when you need to take folic acid every day. After that, it's too late to prevent some serious birth defects. Folic acid now, before you know it.
Do you think we put too much emphasis on winning these days?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Is it important for you, for her to win?
I know it's important for her.
It is important
to
for
win.
her.
You know, it's funny. I think as long as they're competitive, and it's a competitive game and they feel they're in the game, I think that's just as That's fine. At this age, winning and losing isn't a big deal as long as they're competitive and having fun.
A couple of reasons. First, I wanted to have fun. Secondly, she likes the game, so it's a good way to learn the basics. And it's also a good way to learn about teamwork and how to win and how to lose.
Most of the girls it really doesn't matter to them.
Most of my kids, 5 minutes after the game's over. I shouldn't say that. The high school one remembers, but the younger ones, 5 minutes after the game's over.
How do you feel when you lose?
Well, we feel bad, but still we know that we learn from our mistakes of what we did. If we don't win, it's okay because, but I think soccer is really about fun, but winning is exciting. Sometimes if I play a team that I know people on, I care, but sometimes I really don't care.
So you're more competitive if you actually know the people on the other team?
Yeah.
Joining me now, race car driver Donna Verville. Donna, you race up in New Hampshire?
Yes, I do. Hudson's Way.
Tell us how you got into race car driving, what your family's reaction was.
I got into it when my son bought a second car and asked if I wanted to run it in the same division as him, and he got me a helmet, a racing suit, and I was racing the following week with him. It's a lot of fun.
How about your extended family? Sisters, brothers?
Yeah, they were shocked. My sister worked for a Ford company for years. She was in the service department, and her exact words were, "No way." She doesn't know where the gas goes, and they were very surprised. But that was a few years ago.
How has race car driving changed your life, if at all?
It's changed it a lot. I live, breathe, eat, and sleep it at this point. I love the racing. We spend a lot of time, a lot of money, with not a lot of a big payoff. It's just it's a love. It's a love that you get into. They say that once you start racing, if you really, really enjoy it, it's almost like a drug. You can't get enough of it.
Do you feel that driving a car has given you confidence?
It's given me a lot of confidence. Years ago, I wouldn't barely drive anywhere outside of my normal commutes to a couple streets down from where I live to go to work, and wouldn't travel a lot. Now I can travel almost anywhere. I love
Can
to
go
drive.
anywhere and do anything.
Just about, yes, yes.
Good for you, Donna. Donna, let me ask you some questions about women's sports in general. How has female entrance into race car driving changed the sport, if at all?
It's been successful. On the smaller front and the more local tracks. In the bigger fronts, the bigger tracks, right now Shauna Robinson's in the NASCAR field, and from where I sit, I think she's doing an awesome job just to be out there with those guys racing. If you go more local, you get into some of the smaller tracks, there are quite a few female racers that are out there. That,
wonderful to hear.
Yeah, they don't get the recognition. A lot of them don't get it.
Well, let's talk about that for a moment. How does the media treat women athletes generally?
I think it's gotten better. Over the past maybe 10 years, there's been a lot more female participation in a lot of the more male-dominated sports.
Are you at all concerned that women's endorsement contracts tend to be for things like shampoo and lipstick, as opposed to automobiles and sports equipment and power bars?
That, I think, runs along with, if you look at some of the bigger drivers, when they win their first race is when they start getting the endorsements. When you get a female out there that's going to, unfortunately I have to say, prove herself, so she's going to get the bigger contracts. You're not going to get a male driver out there to sell lipstick, of course.
No.
That's not going to happen. But I think you'll see the bigger companies that participate with that field, whatever the field may be, whether it be clothing or batteries or spark plugs or any of that. You're going to see that take off when they have to prove themselves.
Do you think the media portrays women athletes as sexual objects in ways that they don't with male athletes?
Not as maybe 10, 12 years ago, when women just started really getting into the male-dominated sports, but not now. There's been a lot of proven sports out there that the women have proven themselves, and they've taken the ball and run with it. So,
where do you want the sport to take you next?
I'd like to move up into some different classes of the racing divisions. Right now I run with what's called the Hudson Hornets. It's an all-female division. I'd like to run with the rookie stocks, maybe get into Strictly's. There's just higher divisions of racing at the smaller tracks.
How do the male drivers treat the female drivers? As equals?
I would say more equal after the first couple seasons. Within the first seasons, you could see that there was they come off the track, especially after getting hit or something by one of us. Not me, of course, but a couple of the other women drivers, and they had a few choice words for them. Now those women drivers are winning, and they're coming in after the women drivers, and they're coming in second and third, and it's good to see them out there. There's a couple of them now that race with the guys at the track, and they're doing extremely well.
Are you as aggressive as the male drivers?
I tend to think of myself as a little more aggressive. I want to prove myself. I want to be out there and win. I'm not out there just solely to win. I love the sport. I love to race. I love to go fast. But when I do get out there, I have that aggressiveness to want to come in and do my best.
So it's a myth that women are not as competitive as men?
And that's a huge myth. I think we tend to get over it quicker. We get out there and we do get emotional. I was very emotional the first race I won. I mean, there's different levels of emotion. We get hit, we get spun around by the other drivers. But I think we do cool down quicker. We can get into the pits and we can rant and rave and yell and scream. And 9 out of 10 times I'll walk over and talk to the other driver afterwards, or apologize if I have to for whatever happened on the track. You won't find that with a lot of the other guys. You'll find them really yelling and screaming and really going over the edge and getting very hot-tempered.
Well, you got to go home and worry about the meal and the kids. You
right.
don't have a lot of time to
right.
scoop over that.
I go home at night and, like you said, I have to get dinner ready and I have to get up and go to work the next morning, which I'm sure a lot of the other drivers do the same. But after raising my kids for so many years, I've learned to yell at them one second, cool down the next. So, yeah, I've been able to kind of control that the best that I can.
Donna, is it a myth that women are too emotional for organized, team sports as well as things like you do, race car driving?
No, I don't think there's any more emotion than any other driver that's out there. We all get upset at the same level. We all are mad when someone hits the car and spins it out. I've thrown my helmet a few times myself. I've gotten to the face of the other drivers and, why did you do that?
And when you lose, you don't go home and cry for 3 days.
No, a good day is getting the car back on the trailer in one piece and it still runs for us. We get back into the pits and some things are said, but the following week, it's usually gone. We talk, a lot of us are friends. Some of us socialize outside of the area, outside of the track,
but when you start up that engine, look out.
That's right. That's exactly what it is. Yes, we're all out there for a common goal.
Donna, is it a myth that women are so emotional they can barely stay on the road?
That's a myth. We stay on the road very well.
Is race car driving, Donna, a sport where women can compete and do compete equally with men?
Yes. Yes. In the other division, the rookie stock division is mostly male-dominated, and there are currently 2 drivers right now in that division. Both are women, and both are doing extremely well. They are both previous Hornet drivers. When they moved on, they left that division and went into the rookies, which is what I'd like to do. I'd like to get into that class. At a couple of the other tracks, there's another woman that runs with another division, a higher division than the rookies. She's doing extremely well from what I read in the papers and I've seen on the track. Maybe a male-dominated sport, but we're coming up.
We're moving up there.
Yeah.
Donna, you're a mother. You have a full-time job, and you race on weekends and at nights, I assume.
Mostly weekends.
How do you balance it all?
Burning candles at both ends. It's a lot of work, but it's a lot of rewards. Started out with my son racing, saying, "Mom, try it with me." That was about 5 years ago. So we do whatever it takes, whether it be having to work until 6 o'clock at night and then go up and work on the cars until 11, 12 o'clock at night. It's a family thing, so we all we all put together and do it together.
Do you believe that sports are now part of a young girl's culture? You have a young daughter that's into the sport.
Yes. I believe it's important for a young girl to have any type of sport interest, no matter what kind of a sport it is. When my children were younger, they played baseball. They both were on the same baseball team. There were a lot of other girls on the team as well. My daughter was on cheerleading as she got older, and then she wanted to get into a race truck, and she raced for a whole season.
How'd she do?
She finished 4th in points. She did awesome. She did a good job. Yeah, I'm very proud of her. But I think it's important for them just to be in a sport, to keep them occupied, keep them interested in something.
Do you think that society thinks that women athletes should play tennis, or they should play golf, or they should figure skate, but certainly shouldn't race car drive?
Not anymore. Not anymore. There are more aggressive women coming into the different type of male-dominated sports. So maybe a few years ago, but not now.
Do the fans treat you different being female?
Not where we are. Not at our level. I've actually spoken with a few men concerning, like Shauna Robinson in NASCAR, and they all she's washed up. She's not going to make it. I don't believe that. I think if she has the guts to get behind that wheel and go that fast and do the best she can, she'll go far with that sport.
Be a great day if she wins, wouldn't it?
I'd love to.
I think we all would.
I'd love to see it. Yeah.
I'm not a fan necessarily of race car driving in that I don't spend time watching it, but let me tell you, I'd be right there cheering for her, and I think so many women would. Yeah. Tell me about some of the other women drivers. Are they similar to yourself, or are you an exception?
We're pretty much similar. There's Sue, who is 1st in points right now. She's got 2 children. She's a stay-at-home mom. There's Nancy, who is a grandmother. She's got 11 grandchildren.
And she's out there on the weekends.
Her and her son, and as well as Sue and her husband, they share a car because they run in the rookie race and they also run in the Hornets division. There's myself, and then there's Heather, who's got a 2-year-old daughter, and she's a school teacher. Another one of our competitors, another woman named Sue, she runs, I believe, a Friendly's restaurant, and they travel from all over. They don't just live in and around the area and race on weekends. Some of them spend an hour on the road.
And what gets them all to the sport?
Love of the sport.
Love of the sport?
It isn't the money, not at this level. We get paid enough to cover our pit pass.
And everybody's family, how do families react to their mom being a race car driver and their sister being a race car driver?
My kids love it. The kids absolutely love it. My new husband had a few weeks to get used to it, but once he could see the ability in me, he loves it too. He likes to see the competitiveness. The rest of the family was more of, you got to be kidding. It can't be her, of all people in the family. She doesn't know where the oil goes. How can she figure out how to fix an engine or do a motor or anything like that? But it takes learning. That's all. You just
and now you can do it all.
We do. We have to.
Donna, do you believe that women are socialized from the time we're very young girls against competitive aggression?
In my family growing up, you basically could do what you wanted to do, and that's how I raised my children to do what they want to do and how they want to do it. Socially, I think women, they're more the golf and the tennis in some aspects, but I'd like to see more of them in more aggressive sports. I think they do well.
Donna, we wish you the very best, continued success. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Joining me from a previously taped educational forum on girls in sports is the former captain of the U.S. Women's Olympic ice hockey team, Cindy Curley. Cindy, do girls care less about competition than boys do?
I think at the real young ages, I think they do, and I don't mean to generalize, but I think they are more interested in the social and the fun. I think as they grow older, however, they're just as intense and just as competitive as the guys. I think they're a little bit more concerned with team than sometimes the guys are, but having coached both, I think the women are a little bit more sensitive when you give them some constructive criticism, then the boys tend to shrug it off like, oh yeah, whatever, and the girls tend to, oh, I hope she doesn't like me, and I hope she likes me, and boy, am I a good person? So I think sometimes they're more fragile, but they very much care about winning. And I think for most women, they care about winning the right way.
What is the effect of sports involvement generally on girls and women? What role did it play in your life?
I think it gave me a lot of confidence. It made me understand the importance of goals and the importance of commitment, that if I had committed to a team that I had some responsibility. It opened a tremendous amount of doors for me that I'm not so sure would have been opened. I do think it helped me focus on my studies so I could achieve my goal of playing in college and then playing outside. And it's given me a lot of confidence in myself. I think it's helped my self-esteem. It also has taught me the importance of staying in shape and for health reasons. And it's also given me a love of sports in general. I have a true appreciation of sports at every level and every different kind of sports. So I'm a big football fan. Never played. I love the game.
You mean you're not going to try out for the women's professional football, Cindy?
I have a lot of respect for the women that are, but no, that's definitely not for me.
Are women as aggressive as men when they play sports?
I think so. I think if they're encouraged by the coach and the parents and they're given confidence, they are, and I think that is growing as women's sports become more acceptable. If you asked me that 10 years ago, I'd probably say no, that it was shunned upon to play. Now women are playing every sport, including football, and yeah, I think they are as aggressive.
Mel, your experience with your daughter and others?
My daughter, yes, she's very aggressive for her, and I admire her because it's some of the hits that they take are incredible, and I watch them and I go, these are girls playing, and it just marvels me.
Peter, you said some girls play on your son's hockey team?
They're very aggressive and they care very much about winning. Just
no
as
difference
much as the
between
boys.
the boys and the girls?
No, none whatsoever.
Why then do so many girls turn away from sports?
I think they're discouraged by their parents to play. I think they, that they aren't comfortable with it. They've had the wrong coaching. They haven't had a positive coach that's taught them sometimes. When girls grow at a quick rate, their agility hasn't quite caught up, and a coach doesn't understand that. They're just looking at the bottom line of winning instead of the confidence building and development. And maybe playing on, well, the size can help you in hockey, and it's okay if your skiing isn't quite caught up with the size or what have you. And I think it's sad. I think it's how anybody quits a sport because they just don't like it, and it's not for the right reasons.
That's our show on Women in Sports. I'm Diane Sullivan. Thanks for watching.
Morgan! Phone! Yeah, Morgan here. So, hi. Right now? Okay. The itsy-weensy spider climbed up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. Out came the sun and dried up all the rain. And the itsy-weensy spider climbed up the spout again.
I love you, Daddy.
I love you, sweetheart.
Family. Isn't it about time?
What can I say? It's my girl.
From the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
You know how inquisitive kids are. That's why you store sharp objects in a safe place. Keep medicines out of reach. And if you have a gun, you keep it unloaded and locked away. way. As concerned members of the television community, we urge you to be just as careful with television. Kids don't always know what they're watching. That's why you should.